Hi there, I'm Allison Van Schie of Alongside Caregiver Consulting. I was inspired by a recent project my husband undertook after the passing of his father, as it impressed upon me how healthy his activity was in the processing of his grief, perhaps without him even knowing it. He made a prototype replica birdhouse, which you see here, of what had been the family home. The prototype looked perfect to me, but apparently it needed a few adjustments to make the scale more realistic. So he carefully made those adjustments for the remaining birdhouses that he was creating as gifts for his siblings. I too realized that I had undertaken a process somewhat similar, but not anywhere near as creative, to help me process my grief after my own mother had passed away many years ago. So this video portion is actually a reenactment. You see, my mother had battled cancer, which required her to be sedentary. She was a skilled knitter, so she kept on knitting through to the end of her life. Her last project had been knitting multiple squares of 2 different patterns to sew together into a blanket. She didn't quite have enough time to finish the project. So, even though I'm not a skilled knitter like she was, I did have some basic knitting skills. So I used her yarn and needles and I completed the project. That knitted blanket now has a rich heritage for me to pass on to future generations, as both her handiwork and mine lovingly created it. A third example of using a project to help with processing our grief is a cookbook that I received after my cousin passed away at the age of 40. She too had cancer and spent the last 2 years of her life in hospice. Her friends sought to honor her and her life by creating a cookbook, and they did this so that all the proceeds could go to support the hospice. Each of these projects were tangible ways of processing grief and keeping the memory of our loved one alive. I recently shared in the video, Who Am I Hurting?, how my podcast guest wrote about what she learned as a caregiver for her mom in stories that have now been published. Not only were these stories helpful to other caregivers, but they were a means to process her own grieving. In the video, Doesn't Know Me, you'll hear the song that my friend wrote, which captured her feelings after the death of her father, who had Alzheimer's disease. And in The Dementia Puzzle, another caregiver contemplated creating a puffin garden to honor her mum, who had loved puffins. These ways to process grief have the added bonus of having tangible reminders available through reading a story, singing a song, or visiting a garden. It's natural to fear our memories fading, but for caregivers, it can be challenging to find purpose after caregiving, as so much of a caregiver's activity and even identity has involved caregiving for your loved one. To bridge caregiving to life after caregiving can be so hard and may take effort and patience while you grieve. So finding an activity to honor your loved one as you cross that bridge can be most helpful. As death impacts all of us, we grieve in so many different ways. And if you're struggling with grief, please connect with bereavement supports. And if you are struggling with caregiving, tap into alongsidecaregiverconsulting.ca. Thank you for watching this video. And here are the videos I mentioned for you to watch as well. Who Am I Hurting?, Doesn't Know Me, and The Dementia Puzzle. Take care.